Hi everybody, and welcome to my YouTube tutorial. For this fly tying demonstration, I'm going to be showing you how to tie a fly known as the Irresistible. This is an awesome dry fly. It's been out for years and there's many variations out there. If you've ever seen this fly, you've probably seen it more in the Adams style, where when we call it the Adams Irresistible, and it'll share some of the same characteristics. It'll have brown and grizzly hackle at the front and typically grizzly wingtips as well. So whenever you see those on it, and then you see this body of the spun deer hair that's trimmed, then you probably, if you have seen it before, you more than likely have seen that variation of the Irresistible. For the pattern today, I'm going to vary just a little bit, just to make it a little bit different than you've seen before, and also to give you the opportunity to make it a little different than the ones that are already out there on the water. For the hooks, I'm using the Allen D101 BLs. This is a dry fly hook. It's really nice because it already comes barbless. You can check them out at allenflyfishing.com. Fantastic hooks. I'm using a size 10, so this is a larger hook. Whenever I'm fishing this pattern, I really want to ensure that this pattern is something that I can see on the water. I'll use this in big water, rapids, pocket water situations, wider water. This isn't something you're going to be using on a high-pressured stream, with real slow water conditions. The fish will have way too much time to examine this. You can also use this as a hopper-dropper type setup as the hopper. Even though it's definitely not necessarily a hopper, it can replicate some of the characteristics of hoppers, plus it's got that great floatability. A variation you can make that's very easy is leave those really stiff fibers on it whenever you initially tie it, but then whenever you get to the stream, if you feel like there might be crickets or there could be beetles falling to the water, you don't have it in your box, pull out this pattern, trim the tail. That will let that body sit just a little bit lower in the water, and it will closely resemble some of those insects. In that size 10, you also leave yourself a little bit of room to trim a little bit of the Irresistible body away. A couple other little variations you can make are changing the color of the deer hair. Most of the time whenever you see this pattern, it's always going to be that natural deer hair color. Maybe it'll be a little bleached in the natural, but for the most part, you don't really see a lot of tires that go crazy with this. But I'm sure most of you probably have some different colored deer hair hides or little pieces anyway that are dyed. Don't be afraid to try them out and see what it looks like on this pattern. I'm not telling you to go through the entire rainbow and run the gamut when it comes to colors, but don't be afraid to kind of reach outside of your comfort zone whenever you're tying this. Same thing with the wings. If you want to put on those traditional grizzly hackle tip wings, go right ahead. But for the most part, this fly is going to be floating already. You don't have to worry about those two cutesy little wings. If you want to put something that you'll see, don't be afraid to vary it. Put some poly yarn. If you want to put orange poly yarn. If you want to get some calf tail, or calf body hair, which is what I see a lot of the time on this. If you want to go white, go with it. But if you feel like you might have trouble seeing this fly, even though it is that big, don't be afraid to put a different color or something that will just be a little more fluorescent and jump out. People have also used this for some of the bigger drake hatches, and they've also used it at night. So again, think about some of those characteristics that for those patterns. Put them into this pattern, keep that deer hair body because it gives you all that buoyancy. Then ask yourself, am I fishing in the mornings? Am I fishing at night? What will I need to do to make this fly easier to be seen, even if it is a size 10? Keep all that stuff in mind as you're tying this. It's a really fun pattern. I'll go over some of the variations as I'm tying. And again, as always, thanks for viewing this YouTube tutorial. Okay, let's start tying this Irresistible Dry Fly. Again, we're tying this on the D101 BL size 10 hook from Allen Fly Fishing. The first thing I'm going to do on this fly is tie in the tips for the wings. You can use calf tail on this. I recommend a dark color. I really like that dark silhouette a lot of the times, especially whenever this fly is going to be really moving in the water. However, today I'm going to be using a squirrel tail. This is the gray squirrel tail. Typically because the main reason is I like the white tips for the white wings on this fly. However, it's white on the tips of this squirrel, yet there's a nice dark coloration directly below that, and I believe that dark coloration really kind of gives this fly that thorax look. Now that might be more for the tire than for the fish, but to me it does that. So let me clip a little section of this out. Once I get my little section clipped out, you're going to see I have a bunch of tips in here, probably a few too many, so I'm just going to pull some of those out. Then I grab my stacker and place them inside. If you've tied with squirrel tail before, you'll know that it really tends to build up quickly on the hook. But the nice thing about this fly, and specifically about using this squirrel tail here, is that we're only going to be using it for the wings. So it will not be, we really won't give it a chance to build up too quickly.
Now I like the tips of this to be just a hair longer than most normal wings. So I'm just going to measure them for the length and just a hair more. I'm going to lock them in right on top of the hook shank. And as I lock them in, I'm going to wrap back. So I want to wrap towards the bend. So I'm just going to go that far, I'm going to stop, and then trim the butt ends. There might be a couple little ones hanging out there. I want to trim the butt ends so then I can kind of pull tight and wrap this down towards the hook shank to ensure that these tips are completely locked in, because they are known to kind of play some games with tires and roll around the shank of the hook. Now, what you want to double check before moving on is that you definitely have the length and that you'll have enough fibers there for your wings. So just to kind of show you what's going to be happening later on, I may pull these up, just lock them in a little bit just to give you an idea, and then see if I separate them, if I'll have enough there. And I definitely will, because I'm not trying to get a crazy wing in this case. I just want to have a little bit of a wing for some pronunciation to this fly. So once I'm sure I have enough, I'm just going to keep those pointing forward and wrap to this little point. Alright, I'm going to tie in the tail next. For the tail, I'm going to be using some moose body hair. So I have a little chunk of moose body hair. I don't want too many fibers. This is really another instance of less is more, because these fibers, this moose body hair, they definitely will keep this fly on top of the water. Plus, this is an irresistible. We have a deer body hair for the entire body, and it's very buoyant. So we have no problems with this fly sinking. All right, I have my moose body hair. I'm just going to throw this in the stacker as well. Make sure I get all that scroll out of there. These stack pretty quick. When I pull them out, the tips are nice and aligned. Just going to hold on to them. And do the same thing as before. Just measure them. I want them just a hair longer than the shank. I'm going to tie them directly behind where I tied in the wings. Okay, I might just double check the length, make sure it's about what I'm going for. The one problem I've seen tires have with these is that sometimes they'll flare out. If you notice that the tail for your fly is flaring out when using this moose body hair, you may have a few too many fibers. So don't be afraid to kind of, back your thread off, take a few fibers out, and then retie. That is a common problem that I see some tires having whenever they're tying with this. Okay, I have enough in there right now, not too many. I'm going to just trim those butts. Just lock those in completely. And now I'm ready for the body of my fly. So for the body of this fly, we're going to be using deer hair. I'm just going to be spinning it. If you've watched any of my YouTube videos in the past, you'll know I really enjoy spinning deer hair. The one key for this is that we're going to spin about 3/4 of the way up to about right here. Then we're going to leave a little bit of room to tie in a hackle. We're going to make our wings and separate them, and then we'll wrap the hackle forward. So I'm going to just grab some deer hair. I have a little shank of some deer hair. I like to use finer deer hair because it spins, and plus I believe it will still offer similar flotation to the wider deer hair. So let me trim a little section. For each section, I'm just going to make a short little trim, pull out some of that excess stuff. Place it on. The butts will be forward. I'm just going to make 1-2 wraps and then spin it. Okay, each time just going to kind of push those fibers back. I'll be pulling them back. I can't really push them. They won't slide since I have so much thread on this hook. Just advance my thread a little bit. Get these fibers out of the way. Grab some more and do the same thing again. All right, I'm going to get all that excess out of there. Okay. Advance my thread, grab some more deer hair. This is really a lot of fun. It's great to see, first of all, it's fun to see this deer hair just flare out as you're spinning it, but it's also really awesome whenever you cut the deer hair and everything just completely changes on the fly. When it goes from this complete mess to an actual fly that looks kind of like an insect. Alright, I think this will probably be my last section of deer hair to spin. I may have a little too much, so before I can put it on, I'm just going to take a little clump of the deer hair out. Put one more clump in. Take a look at what I have. Yeah, and I think that's perfect right there. That should be just enough to add a little bit of dubbing. In fact, I have that little extra piece of clump. I'm just going to add one more little clump in there. Just try to jam it against the last clump, and that should be fine. All right, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to move my thread forward up to where I had left my, my wings before. I'm going to pull my wings back, just put one wrap there. That's it. And I'm going to put 2 half hitches. I'm going to trim my thread. And then I'm going to back out the camera so you can kind of get a better peek at what's going on here. So here is my Irresistible right now, which looks like a big hunk of just craziness. I'm going to turn my fly upside down, and I'm going to make a cut the whole way back to the hook. Because I know there's no tailing fibers on the bottom. I don't have to be worried about cutting that tail at all. I do the same thing on the top. Just go back and just get a lot of this hair out of there for that initial, get some of these initial big cuts. I don't have to worry too much about cutting anything else because there's not really anything up there to cut. So I have the top trim. Now the body's starting to develop. I'm going to go in from the side away from you. Just make a nice cut the whole way back to those tails. I'm going to start making a rotation around. I'm looking for longer fibers first. There's some long fibers on this side. So I'm going to get those out of the way. I really want to make sure that I'm not doing anything to that tail. There are a lot of other tyers that do some different methods to ensure that they don't trim the tail. If you're a beginning tyer, you may want to consider one of those methods. If you've been spinning deer hair at all, or if you have pretty good eyes, I wouldn't worry too much about it as long as you can distinctly see that tail. That's why I like to keep that tail a dark color, because then it really does show up against everything else. Okay, right now I'm just picking out the longer deer hair fibers. I see 1 or 2 more in there that I just want to get out of there. Okay. Okay, after I had those longer fibers out, now it kind of looks like a bomber at this point. Another popular salmon fly. Now I'm just going to do a little more aggressive trimming, a little finer. I'm going to keep using my scissors. I have a pretty decent pair of scissors here that I can use. Sometimes I'll switch over to a razor blade. I also have one of these X-Acto knives that's pretty easy to go along with, and just trim whenever you're getting down to really final dimensions. This is such a large fly, being that it's a size 10, that I don't really feel I need to go down to anything like that extreme. The nice thing is, as you're making these cuts, you can see if you've pushed them together enough, you're going to have a really nice textured body, and you'll have some great flotation. Okay, at that point, everything's looking pretty darn smooth. And I think I'm just going to call it right there. Just leave that go. Now I'm going to grab my thread, reattach it directly behind my, my wings, and then wrap forward to my wings. I don't want to push them down much more than they already are. Let me get that thread out of there. Okay, now I'm going to, let me zoom the camera in. I'll show you exactly what's going on here. Okay, now I'm going to go as close to the wings as possible. I'm going to push them, or I'm going to lift them up with my left hand. With my right pointer fingernail, I'm going to push them back just a little bit. Just try to get any more space at the front. I really like to maximize my space at the front. So as I did that, then I'm going to take my thread and just wrap really aggressively towards the back. So I'm going to build up just a little post in front of these to help them stand straight up, or as straight up as possible. You'll see that post slowly developing. Then when I let go, they're starting to stand up. Don't be afraid to really push back and really be aggressive with your thread. Once you get them standing to a pretty decent point, mine are just about there, then I'm going to separate them simply by just pulling them apart with my fingers, finding a nice middle point. Once I find a decent middle point, I'm just going to wrap through them with my thread. Just put some figure eights. I want to make sure I've split them correctly, so I might take some extra time. Okay, I have one side. The side that's closest to the camera is looking good. The side closest to me, I just need a little more work on. I'm just going to take a little bit more time. Okay. Right now I have some nice separation. What I'm going to do is just wrap back. And before I do that, I want to make sure all those fibers are coming forward. Okay. It looks like they are. So now I'm going to grab a piece of my hackle. There's a couple different hackles that you can use for this fly. Some guys will recommend grizzly, others grizzly and brown, similar to the Adams. I actually have a very light Cree-colored hackle that I'm going to use for this. This is what the hackle looks like. You can see that light brown coloration in there. So it's not a true Cree, but it's kind of, we'll call this a light Cree or a Cree variant, or even a grizzly variant if you want to get truly technical. I'm just going to strip some of the fibers at the bottom. I'm going to actually tie this hackle on top, coming forward. The hackle stem is a very hard stem on this particular hackle, so I want to make sure I have it tied in. And whenever I move that stem with one of my fingers, if I see that hackle moving at the tip, I'll put a couple more wraps on it because I want to make sure as I'm wrapping that hackle forward, I know that stem's completely locked in place. Now when I move it, nothing seems to be happening near the tip. Just going to reach in there, trim it, advance my thread. That's going to be my tie-off point. There's a couple little pieces of the wings that were smaller. I'm just going to get those out of there. Okay, now I'm going to advance my Cree hackle. I'm trying to make approximately 3 turns behind, directly behind the wings. Then I'm just going to hold the wings back, make 1 and a second wrap, 2. After I make that second wrap, I might just hold it straight up in the air. I'm going to take my thread. I'm just going to move it back and forth as I wrap around. There's 1. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to, you'll see me just moving my thread back and forth. So I'm very careful not to push down any of those hackle fibers. All right, I should have all those hackle fibers locked in place now. I'm going to hold on to that tip, just trim it off. Now if you look, there's a few of these fibers that are coming forward. We have a couple options there. Some tyers will recommend trimming them off. In this case though, I'm just going to push them all with my, I'm going to put them between 2 of my fingers and make a couple wraps at the front of the hook. If you've left enough space there, they should all go back, leaving you more than enough room to tie off. They have. I just put in a half hitch. Here's my whip finish. And trim my thread and get it out of there. All right, let me back this up because there's definitely a lot of stuff going on in this fly. So I'll back the zoom up so you can see exactly what we have going on here. I'm going to move some of these fibers out just to show you exactly how this fly ended up. Let me kind of back them off. So this is the finished Irresistible. This fly came out really nice. The hackle, if you notice it, is a really nice length. Maybe just a hair longer than you would typically expect, but it's really how I like to fish it on this fly. I really like this fly to be a larger fly. If you take a peek at the body, it came out to a really nice, pretty body. It's going to offer a lot of buoyancy. Now, the one thing that I can kind of suggest on this, if you're looking at your body and you say, geez, this top is just a hair too big, don't be afraid to take a pair of scissors, especially these curved ones, from the back and do a few
a few trimmings to kind of get it to looking exactly where you like it. For instance, if I'm looking at this right now and I want to be a little critical of one of my own flies, I would say, geez, this underneath section, I could probably do a little more trimming there. I would just push these hackles forward, make sure I'm not going to cut them, and just make a couple little trims of the body. Is that something that I think is absolutely necessary? Absolutely not, but I want to let you know that don't be afraid. That's what tires do. They do whatever it takes. So here's a finished look at the fly. I'm just going to give you a quick overview the whole way around. I'll give you a little peek at the front. I'll turn towards you so you can see those wings. And from the back. And there is the finished Irresistible. So again, this is an Irresistible fly. This is tied on the Allen Fly Fishing Dry Fly hook. It's D101BL. This is a size 10. You can find those hooks at allenflyfishing.com. That is a featured hook for today's fly. I appreciate everything. As always, I really appreciate the comments. If you'd like to leave a comment or a question, please feel free to do so on this actual YouTube page, or you can email me at tcammisa@gmail.com. Thank you, everybody.